We out of red in England. All aboard, yeah, you know it's Hype Train FC. Modern ambition, we got blue and gold in our kit, plus you know we the champs of the league. And we don't quit. Started from grassroots, yeah, the sport, we ain't taking it light. You know it's real, from fantasy to the field. You better believe the hype. Yeah.
Hello one and all, and welcome aboard the home of Hype Train FC on our YouTube channel and to what is our third edition of the Hype Train podcast. My name is Robert Austin, the owner of Hype Train, and today I'll be going through a very particular topic that's going to be introduced for the 2023-24 season, and it's all to do with points deductions. Upon airing, the date will be the 25th of August 2023, just a week removed away from our second podcast, which was a very good development talk with Jordan Goodall at Sandhurst Men Reds. And today we have another guest in the form of Alastair Kay. I'm absolutely thrilled to have a member of the Berks Bucks FA, or if you don't know what that is, it's the county FA level. They are the team that report into the national FA and administer football across the local leagues itself. Alastair has thankfully come on board to talk through all things misconduct, as well as the points deductions that are going to be in place with football teams throughout the 2023-24 season at grassroots level. And what we go into is the points deductions themselves, the cases of misconduct, and everything around the new topic that's been heavily pressed out to clubs, players, individuals and volunteers throughout the season. It's about an hour long, so strap in. There's a lot of good examples. Alastair puts himself across very well whilst he talks about some of the rules and some of the examples that, you know, can demean a club losing points or having misconduct charges against them throughout the course of the season. Apart from that, strap in, enjoy the podcast, and yeah, it's just a week out from the start of the season, so it's important information for all clubs, volunteers and everybody else around county FA football to get involved with, so I hope that you enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Hype Train podcast. This edition of the podcast is coming to you just a few days shy of the 23-24 season starting for clubs all across the Berks Bucks FA. And I've actually got some time free for one of the county FA officers. Alastair, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, my name's Alastair Kay. I'm Head of Governance here at Berks Bucks FA.
Lovely. And for people that don't know, what is the general, you say head of governance, what does that entail on a day-to-day for you?
Yeah, so I head up the football services team, so we're here to provide support to the clubs and leagues across the county, and not everybody in the volunteer workforce that keeps football running on a weekly basis. So we help out with all of the technology side of things, any kind of issues that may crop up between clubs and leagues during the season. And then we've also got responsibility over the governance of the game. So safeguarding on-field, off-field misconduct incidents, just trying to make sure that football remains a safe and enjoyable environment for everybody.
Lovely. And the main reason why I was so tempted to have somebody from the county F on today was to talk about misconduct, because the county FA have been sending out, and the FA have been sending out a lot of information about new guidelines for next season. In the Premier League, they're starting to crack down on dissent on the touchlines and in the matches, and they're doing slightly different things at grassroots level to try to incur less aggravations of assault and general misconduct. So I'm very keen to go into the misconduct. So from your point of view, do you have a little broad overview about what the changes and what the rules will be in place for the grassroots clubs next season?
So I think the key one that's coming in is the introduction of points deductions for clubs who have repeat incidents of discriminatory language or serious offences against match officials. That's the real big change that's coming in for next season, and we hope will make a really positive impact in terms of poor behaviour that occasionally crops up from time to time on the pitch.
So an immediate question that comes to my head when you say that is, so what has led to this point for the FA and the county FAs to kind of come down hard on this? Has there been an increased level of incidents across all ages? Is there for this to have come in and or have they teamed up with the higher ups in the Premier League to make sure that they introduce all of this in one go across the board?
So I think points deduction is something that's been discussed within the FA for quite a while now. Certainly, if you look at the historic trends, incidents around discrimination are on the rise. It's always an interesting one. We may come back to this later, but there's a real push to try to make sure every incident of discrimination is reported to us. And actually, at the moment, we're wanting to see more reports come in because we feel that across the country, across the county FA network, up and down the country, there's a perception that discrimination is probably underreported by up to 100%. So there could be twice as many incidents out there that are actually being reported to us. So at the moment, we want to see the number of reports rise so that we're confident that any incident that happens out there is actually being reported to us. Certainly, what that's meant is that.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Go on. Yeah.
I was going to say,
so basically, you're seeing more people online, and there's more cases online of abuse, and then you're wondering why they're not coming to the county FA level for you guys to have proper action in place to help out referees, volunteers, and general clubs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to know everything that's happening in terms of poor behaviour on the field of play, because that's the only way we can then deal with it, and hopefully by taking a hard line, setting those sanctions, removing those individuals from the game will create a safer and more enjoyable experience for everybody else. Certainly, I think we found that since came back post-COVID, there's been a general deterioration in behaviour. It's something that we see across spectators, across players, and we've seen an escalation in the number of serious offences against match officials. So the definition for that is threatening language or behaviour, physical contact or assaults on match officials. So the FA are understandably keen to stamp this out. As I say, points deduction's been on the cards for a while. It's the power to do it has been in the FA regulations for a long time, but it's not been something that's actually been exercised. I think the FA have looked to formalise that process now, and really kind of set their stall out to say that there is zero tolerance to discrimination in the game. We've got to protect grassroots referees. We've got to make sure that these types of incidents are removed from football.
Absolutely. So let's go into some of those misconduct examples. So let's say you're at a hype train game on a Sunday, and there's an incident of misconduct. So first of all, are there any people that are excluded from this, such as managers, players, spectators? Will the club or that group be penalised as a whole, regardless of who you are? Because I feel like sometimes players have it in their heads that, at least from people that I'm speaking with, that it's purely about a player issue. So is this trying to obviously combat members of the management staff and volunteers on the side as well?
So FA regulations mean that we can't take action against individual spectators if they don't hold any other role in football. So if you're just there as a fan watching a game, we can't take action individually against that person. However, the club's responsible ultimately for their behaviour. So were a spectator to use discriminatory language or confront a referee, we would take action against the club for failing to control the spectator.
So one example that I always see online and across Facebook posts, social media, is that there seems to be a lot of parents complaining about other abusive parents at games. So if you have like a mouthy bunch of parents at a game, not that I've ever seen it firsthand, but let's say it's an example, would that be penalised at a club level? So would the club secretary say, why have you got 8 to 10 spectators and proof and evidence arguing and shouting and fighting at games? What would you do to the parents? Would the county FA have the right to say you can't come to those games, or would the club be given sanctions that would basically stop the parents having any further involvement or keep them quiet on the sidelines? So what's the ultimate aim because the kids and adults are different, but what's the ultimate aim to curb parent behaviour on the sideline in that regards?
That's a real challenging one. It's something we're looking to address. So our remit would be with the club. So for us, if a club's charged with failing to ensure their spectators conduct themselves in an orderly fashion, which is the full language for it, ultimately they'd face a fine, which were increased at the start of last season. So typically you'd be looking into 3 figures for kind of a fine for poor spectator behaviour. What we as the county would like to see is the club take ownership of that then with these individual spectators themselves. So as you say, it's challenging with youth players and their parents, but it may well be that the parents asked not to attend games for a certain period of time, and the club should then be working with them to make sure there's still arrangements for their child to attend games and be safeguarded whilst they're at the game. Because what we don't want is the player to be punished for it or to be penalised for it. As I say, the club should be making sure that they're setting that example as well. We can also work with the clubs to try to help them convey that message. So we'll we'll support the club in any conversations with parents, reinforcing codes of conduct, setting our expectations for that. We will be releasing we've actually got some external funding to create a video campaign, which we're going to be releasing at the start of the season, that's really trying to drive that message home, that ultimately when the parents behave badly, the people that it's impacting or the people that it's affecting are their children, and it's ruining the game for young players who just want to get out there and play. So we really want to make sure people understand the impact of their behaviour on others.
Mm-hmm. And with managers, I'm a manager on the touchline on a week-to-week basis. I can come in and out of playing. You see this a lot in adult football, especially Saturday and Sunday league. For managers, if I have decided, if we've got a goal ruled out in the last minute of the game, and I've gone bananas on the side of the pitch, I'm effing. We're still
talking hypothetically here.
Oh, hypothetically. Well, maybe. Well, the thing is, I'll be honest, because it's the sake of the podcast. I've gone ballistic at the referee a couple of times when I was in my first couple of years. We had a game where my brother Sam, who runs the club with me, we were attacking and the other team had just scored another goal. Sam's just gone ballistic at the referee. He's rightfully sent Sam off, and Sam apologised afterwards. But in those juvenile years, I got frustrated so easily at referees, and across the game, when you have new coaches, first couple of years, sometimes they do get, that sometimes their words aren't indicative of what they're going to be as a coach, but it happens. And I've said some unsporting things sometimes. I've called the referee a cheat on a few occasions. I've told him to look at the linesman and talk. And, you just say things out of place sometimes. But as you get older and you're in the game a little bit more, I've calmed down quite a lot. But there's instances where you just want to pick up the referee and just shake him and say, what was that about? But obviously, so from my point of view as a manager, speaking hypothetically, as a hypothetical example, I'm at a game and I've just gone ballistic at the referee, effing and blinding. There are people in a public park or in a little stadium watching. Is that also a case of misconduct as well going forward?
Yes. And always has been. So absolutely. Abusive language towards referees is not acceptable. If it's a player, if it's a straight red card, 2-match ban. If it's a member of the technical area, again, they should be sent off. It's a red card offence. Comes through a misconduct process, so that any suspension wouldn't be immediate, but it would come through to us. We'd raise a misconduct charge. That would then, you'd have the opportunity to respond to that, so you can accept it or deny the charge and put in any evidence that you want to or mitigation. Would go to a panel and they would eventually issue a sanction. And typically you'd be looking at a 2 to 4 match ground ban and a fine of around £40 to £60, let's say. And because we're talking grassroots football, because we're talking public pitches, council pitches, it's issued as a ground ban. So the expectation and the requirement is that you're not there at the venue. We're not Premier League. We haven't got stadia. We haven't got directors' boxes that you could deliver a team talk, go and sit in the director's box during the game, away from the action, talking on the phone, and as you see, kind of the pro game managers do, but just not be on the sideline. The requirement is you can't be at the venue itself. Yeah,
of course. Well, some teams at our level don't even have changing rooms, so exactly. It's either they're going to be sat in the car park or I don't know where they're going to go, sat in somebody's house opposite the pitch with a pair of binoculars. To
some extent, credit to them if they're able to do that. But as I say, our requirement is they can't be at the venue, so they can't be at the ground.
So you made a very clear distinction about, and we've gone through this process, and I'll happily talk about one experience we had because the club in question doesn't exist anymore, but the whole process of going to a panel. So some new clubs in particular won't know what this is. And before I'll get your intervention, I'll explain what happens in a case of misconduct. So we had a player that got headbutted on the side of the pitch once, in the teeth. So I'll rewind a little bit. Our football club, we like to take evidence about everything. We have a video camera, we take photography, we make sure that we have a very, very strict process of what happens in a case of an assault or any type of abuse or misconduct, so that we could then report to the county FA, especially when players get punched or they lose teeth. But in this one instance, in our first season, 4 years ago, the team doesn't exist anymore. They headbutted our player when he got substituted on the far side of the pitch. And we took some photos, his blood streaming all over his face. And what happened is that we got the evidence, we took photos, we got some of our video footage and sent it to the county FA. And then what the county FA does from there, from my experience, is that they will look at the evidence and then they'll have a hearing where the clubs are brought in some type of capacity, whether it's online or in person at Aylesbury where the Bucks and Bucks are. And then they just go through basically a hearing and then there's sanctions afterwards as well. In the case of our instance, the player and me went to the Berks Bucks. We got to Aylesbury and it was the worst weather ever. It was in the middle of December, and it was just pouring it down all evening. We got there and then the other team didn't show up and said, "Oh yeah, don't worry, you've won your case." So we had to go all the way back an hour in the rain again. But yeah, so that for clubs is kind of like the process. And so on your point, so what I was going to lead to is this whole process of having a panel. Are there things that you encourage clubs to do in the case of misconduct? Let's say you've had somebody chin another person or be abusive in a game. What do you recommend clubs do in this instance?
So, well, I think there's a bit difference. If you're looking at abusive language, it's possibly a little bit less immediate than if someone's been head-butted and has blood streaming, because obviously I can understand violence like that will lead to a stronger reaction. But ultimately, we want clubs and we want individuals to try to stay as calm as possible. So let's take discrimination, because obviously it's a hot button topic at the moment. If a player is victim of discrimination and it hasn't been heard by the referee, it should be brought to their attention immediately. The referees have got guidance that they should stop the match, speak to the players involved and take a detailed report about what has allegedly been said, inform both managers that this has been reported to them and that they'll submit a report to the county after the game, and then the game can continue. If you're a manager and one of your players comes to you and says that they've received abuse, whether it's discriminatory or threatening abuse or just general abusive language, again we'd encourage the same response. Try to speak to them, and people are going to react in different ways. So there's no right or wrong way for somebody to react if somebody's treated them like that. Some people will be angry, some will be upset, some may be withdrawn. But I think as the manager, you've got a responsibility to try to support them. So it's remaining calm, establish from them exactly what's been said or what's happened. Bring it to the attention of the other coach. If you are the other coach in that situation and the opposition manager comes over to you and says one of your players has allegedly said or done this to one of my players, again, no matter how well you know that player, don't just dismiss it out of hand, because that can actually then discourage a valid complaint coming in. If people feel that any complaint is just going to be completely ignored or belittled, or people are going to come back at them in an accusatory way. So it's about trying to maintain that level of professionalism and then speaking to all parties to try to understand what's happened. We'd encourage statements to be taken as early as possible, because then it's fresh in your mind. And the statements need to be as factual as possible as well. So it's trying to record who has said what and when, and where it's been heard by other players or been witnessed by other players, making sure that they're providing their own accounts at the same time. If you are talking to players trying to get those accounts, it's important as well not to lead them. So you've got to try and be as open as possible with the questions. So rather than say, was it the number 2 that did it? Or it was them, wasn't it? And point at a player, just ask them to describe who it was. So it's got to be the witness that's identifying what's happened rather than just confirming what's been, being given to them. Yeah. And then as soon as you have all of that, send it through to us at the county.
Is there anything that the county FA offers to clubs, such as a form for this? Let's say they want to take a statement after a game. Yeah. Is there a statement for this where clubs can't be leading? Because it is easy to say, was it definitely this guy? And then they're in the moment, I don't know. And then, so for the sake of not being biased, is there something the county FA can offer for clubs not to have that imprint?
Yeah, so we've got various statement templates. We've got ranging from just a general kind of online Microsoft form that then comes through to the county, which is just tell us what happened. to a more comprehensive statement form, which is much more detailed around who else may have witnessed it and providing their contact details, kind of asking for physical descriptions if you're not able to specifically identify the individual, kind of categorising the types of behaviour that you've witnessed and the exact words that have been provided.
Okay, so that's providing statements and evidence. Let's say there's an incident of discrimination and there's a lack of evidence, not for the lack of trying, but just there is a lack of evidence. How would that be processed? Because obviously a club like mine that would have a video camera and people filming or doing photography and detailed administration, what would happen in the case where clubs aren't as detail orientated and they don't have the same ability or function to be able to do that? Are these going to be harder cases to prove?
Absolutely. And it's not uncommon that we will get a report after a match that hasn't been reported to the referee at the time, or even if it has been reported to the referee at the time, that hasn't been witnessed by anybody else. So we've got a player that comes to us and says, during this game, the opposition number 9 called me X. We go to we try and first of all work with the victim and say, is there anybody else that witnessed this that can provide statements? Can you give us more details? So we'll try to gather the evidence kind of supporting the allegation first. But sometimes it may not have been heard by anybody else, might have been whispered under the breath during the game. We'll take that allegation to the alleged offenders club and ask them to provide a response on their observations in it. As you can imagine, typically that will result in a denial. And then you'll be left in a situation where you've effectively got one statement for, one against. In those situations, it can be very hard for us to proceed to a charge. And we will look at some of the surrounding evidence. So if we got a statement that's from the manager that says, I didn't hear a comment, but the player immediately asked to be substituted and came off the field in tears, or he was angry and he told me immediately what had happened, that is corroborating. It may not be direct eyewitness evidence that confirms the account, but it's contributory evidence that suggests, a comment may have been made because this person was clearly upset and affected by it.
Yeah, so that's really good, because the one thing that at club level, I can only speak for adult football, adult male football at the moment. Hopefully we can get a women's team going in a few years and then open up a whole other kettle of fish in terms of that world, because I'm not in that whole world. But for speaking from an adult male point of view, I attend a lot of committee meetings for my Saturday and Sunday leagues. I'm on the committee for my Saturday league, and on Sunday league I attend everything. The one thing that is constantly held up and revisited every month, and it seems to be delay, is to do with these type of misconduct charges, or any type of charges where every month we read the minutes and then there's a list of ongoing county FA or league investigations over alleged incidents. Typically, with all of this new, so it's leading to the question of, with all of this new guidance and the hope that we can improve football over the long period of time, how are the county FA going to facilitate a lot of these additional charges that are going to be coming in? If there's going to be a strong push to obviously make sure that clubs are giving you guys the evidence that you need and to try to push the game in the right direction, have the FA equipped you guys to be able to handle this? Is there a provision in place to make sure that you're not just inundated? And the meetings that I attend, where there's 4 to 5 or a number of ongoing cases that they're getting resolved in a way where we're not basically being loggerheaded into a big jam.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the FA restructured their disciplinary department about 4 years or so ago. They introduced regional discipline managers. So we're part of believe it or not, we're part of the Western region. I think in the 8 years I've been here, I've been East, South, and I'm now West, despite never having moved office. But we're considered part of the West. So we've got a regional discipline manager from the FA that we will meet with weekly to review our ongoing serious cases. So those ones I mentioned earlier. And he will provide support through the investigation, through reviewing any case files before we lead to a charge, and then kind of holds us to account as well to make sure that we're operating efficiently and effectively. Mm-hmm. The FA also have a special panel that hear all of these types of charges, the National Serious Case Panel. So again, they've had additional training, and it's also the hearings are centralised at the FA. So again, that's helped speed up some of this process. From a county perspective, though, we've definitely recognised the need to improve our resources in this. So you may have seen that last season, as it is now the 22-23 season, we entered into a partnership with an organisation called Sport Integrity Matters, who now provide specialist investigation support to quite a number of county FAs across the country. So they've got a team of dedicated investigators who handle the investigation process for us. And I think because of that, we've got, it's access to dedicated, experienced professionals that are solely looking at that area. So again, that level of expertise, the level of rigour of the investigations is really, really strong. It also frees us up as the county FA staff, gives us a bit more capacity to focus on supporting clubs through the process. During the season, from when I used to handle the investigations myself, you might be having 20 or 30 new cases come in each week that you're dealing with, and it's a challenge to stay on top of where every single case is. At any given stage, we may have 60 to 70 open cases in the system. So outsourcing the investigation side certainly helps with that. The other thing we're looking to do is we've received some funding through the Football Delivery Fund to create a partnership with a victim support organisation, so that when somebody comes to us saying they've been the victim of discrimination or a serious offence, so if it's an assault if they're a match official, or if it's an under 18 that's had a really challenging incident, we'll be able to provide them with dedicated professional support. Again, it's recognising that at the county we need to improve our service, but we may not as members of staff have some of those skills to be equipped to deal with people who are going through a traumatic time or mental health issues as a result of being a victim in one of these instances. So again, we're looking to create those partnerships to make sure we're providing that highest level of service.
That is reassuring, because the perception on the ground level is that the county FA or the FA in general hadn't factored in this. I was there thinking, my God, what are the county FA going to go for next season? They're just going to be inundated with this big push. So it's nice that there's something in place for you guys to be able to, take some specialist help on, which is really, really good. And especially with referees. Referees is probably the big one at the moment. Reading, where we're based, we struggle for Sunday League referees quite a lot across our division, and the league are constantly worried about the diminishing numbers. So on the referees, what are you guys channeling with the referees? What type of information are you telling them ahead of the new season? Have they been given new powers, or are you making it easier for them to report on these things to make the process seamless, like what the clubs are going to be going through? Because obviously unfortunately they have to be a protected species until we can bring the numbers up and treat everybody fairly. So what type, so I know it's a bit of a broad question, but are there things that are in place for referees moving forward, especially new referees? Yeah.
So I mean, we do a lot of work with referees, right from training to the most experienced referees. Certainly the reporting systems have been available to them and are remaining the same. So referees have access to a different part of the whole game system. So after a match, they'll log in, put through any red and yellow cards, but also be able to submit extraordinary incident reports, as we call them, for any act of misconduct. We're doing additional kind of resources and guides and training for them around what we need in one of those extraordinary incident reports, so that when something comes in, we're getting all the information we need, because again, that will streamline the process if we're not having to go back to the referee for additional information or to try to get clarification on some of what's happened. We have the referee development officer within the county, Sam Myatt, who provides a great level of support for them when they do have some of these incidents. And again, we're looking through the new partnership we're hoping to create around victim support to offer additional support for them when something does happen. It's interesting you say about the numbers. We've got our referee numbers are continuing to grow, but it's all very much focused around youth level referees coming through.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, we're looking to run specialist kind of adult male referee courses effectively for people that want to come in at the and referee in adult leagues, to make sure that they've got access to those courses.
So I interviewed one of the people that I spoke to on my podcast, which is going to be coming up. I spoke to James Mason, who is involved with Give Back FC, and he went into some detail in our town of Reading about the Reading Referees Association. Do you guys work with these referees associations in local towns to help enable their referees? Because the overall point of view that I got from James is that there seems to be a bit of frustration about the relationship, that the fact that in adult football the referee numbers are dwindling whilst the county FA numbers are growing for junior and women's football, and it feels like there's a lot of frustration that these referees unions aren't being empowered enough to try to help get these numbers through. So is that something that could potentially help, or do you guys work in facility with them to basically try to improve the standard of referees and bring more in, like at a local basis?
We try and work as close as we can with the RAs. Ultimately, though, I think it's the county that's providing the training courses and that's empowered by the FA to recruit and develop new referees. So unfortunately, it's not a case where they can take on that ability to kind of run the new sessions themselves, but obviously we work closely with them to make sure that any new courses are being advertised, that any new referees are getting the support they need. And certainly the Reading RA is probably one of our most active associations across the county. I know Steve Smith, who does a lot of the welfare support for the referees down there, does a great job in supporting any referees that go through any incidents. And generally across the board, they do a good job in trying to recruit and support any referees coming through the system.
Yes, that's great. So with misconduct, so let's say you've got a referee in the middle who's in the middle of whether it be misconduct from team to team or team to referee or spectator to player, whatever the case will be. We've kind of gone over about the reporting system. How much impact do referees have with their reports? Let's say you've got a he said, she said report, and you know, one of those where you just have no idea what to do with it. It's just in loggerheads for a while. How much do the referee report matters? Because every time, from my perspective, the county FA lean quite heavily on the referee reports as well. So are you very much in the camp of relying on their information as sacrosanct ahead of the teams, or in the case of a tiebreaker, or sometimes is it dismissed? Or I'm just keen to know, more of a broad strokes thing, how much the referees have an impact on these hearings for club level.
Definitely the referee report carries a lot of weight. I think we've got to look at the context around who the referee is in relation to the game. So in a lot of youth leagues, it will be the home side that appoints a referee. In those cases, if it ends up being, you know, it's another member of the club, or it's the coach, or it's a family member of somebody within the club, that's taken into consideration. But generally, when we're looking at the adult game, if you've got independent referees that are being appointed by the league that have no relationship with either, you know, formal relationship with either side, I appreciate it's a close-knit community, so they'll referee you goodness knows how many times each season, but that they are seen as independent, so that will carry a lot of weight for us.
So an example, we had, I'll use an example we had. I won't name the club because I like them, and I think, you know, volunteers get a bad rap as well. We put on all of our time and effort. But we had an instance where the team on a Sunday league cancelled our referee. They didn't appoint another one. They also didn't give me the opportunity to find a referee at short-term notice. They didn't want to delay the kick-off even by 15 minutes for me to be able to speak to my team. Their manager ended up refereeing the game. And without sounding biased, it was a nightmare. We sent in a 26-minute video, a report to the county FA with just all of the breaches that this referee was making in the game. And at the end of the game, I was in a bit of a tiff. I refused to pay the referee until we had a hearing, or I'd put out a comment to the league itself. In instances where, let's say you do have a bias on one side with the referee, let's say it's their manager or parents, regardless if this is adult or junior football, let's say the opposing club puts in a complaint saying he was biased and harassing the other team. What happens in those instances? Because that is the crux of playing at the basement level. This is what puts people off sometimes playing Sunday League football, at least in my experience anyway, that you have these instances where referees that aren't affiliated have the powers of the referee, and the league make it very clear that they have the powers of the referee, and rightfully they should, but ultimately they use that to their nefarious purposes sometimes. And again, I really like the guys in question. They'll probably know who it is, but I'm not demeaning them. I think they're great for running football clubs, and I wouldn't ever look to penalise on people's efforts in the mornings, because it's hard enough when a referee drops out, let alone having to do that in your own position. So what happens in those instances? Because those are the ones that would really frustrate me in that instance, or other clubs that have basically felt like they've been cheated away from a game and they don't know how else to go to the county FA with.
Let me flip it back to you, I guess. What would you want to happen? Or what do you think should happen?
So this is a good question. So okay, let me peel back my report that I sent to the league. I said, so the league don't have, so for listeners at home, all of the leagues in the county FA have to abide by the same rule book, basically. Otherwise, they're not a county FA affiliated league. You could play football with clown shoes on for all they know in other leagues. But in the instances here, we're talking about cheating and constant, I consider it misconduct, because basically you're aggravating other people to the point of having high tension. And what these instances do is that they just breed malcontent for the future. And what you want to do is make sure that if you have a game against a team later down the line, it's not going to lead to an escalation. So what I recommended to the league was that there has to be something in place about cheating. If you can outright prove, with definitive proof, that there is cheating on board, the clubs need to be sanctioned. And what we went through with the league was that, they agreed that there was cheating involved and it looked really bad on the opposition club, but they couldn't actually penalise them. And I was actually warned about my conduct for not paying the referee in a timely manner. I did pay the referee as soon as this thing had happened, but I got warned about my conduct about not paying the ref, and nothing happened to the opposing club apart from a slap on the wrist. So my point of view is that if you can definitively prove it, refereeing is a very subjective matter.
Yeah.
But if you had this instance again, where you've got 50 or 60 instances where, you're basically breeding a situation where anything can escalate at a moment's notice, I would suggest that the club be penalised. I don't know if a points deduction is the right way to go, but if it's repeated, I would definitely be open to it if this was something that was happening on a week-to-week basis on a home game or something like that. But I think that these clubs need to be investigated, and they never are. And that's so. I don't know if that answers it, but I think they need.
Unfortunately, we're limited in what we'd be able to do with those situations. The general principle is, if a referee doesn't show up, the teams agree on somebody to referee. That person has the full rights and responsibilities of a referee. Therefore, the match has been completed according to league rules, laws of the game, and everything else. So.
Now, to interject, there's a very clear distinction that I want to make before I kind of know where you're leading.
Agree on the referee in advance.
But if you don't agree on the referee in advance, so this is what happens, and this is what we were told would happen to us. If we didn't agree upon the referee, if we decided to walk away, the game wouldn't be postponed. The team that agreed on the referee would get the points. So there'd be
a failure to fulfill the fixture.
Exactly. The message would be the team that doesn't want to go through having the opposing manager referee them would be penalised for not wanting the opposing manager to referee them, even though there's priors about them refereeing them in a negative way. And that's the issue. It'll come down to the RCA negotiation, effectively. And what we sometimes see is that, one manager might referee the first half and the other one will referee the second half. And that way it's deemed a bit more fair. But ultimately, I think from the league's perspective and our perspective, the match has been completed. Yes, yeah.
It's hopefully a one-off as well. So, again, I take on your point about if this is happening week in, week out, and I think then there needs to be a conversation with the league around kind of how they're appointing referees and who's being appointed to that club, for that club's home fixtures. But if it is a one-off, as you say, you're not going to be in a position where the result of the match is going to be overturned. And I think from our perspective, if that person's unlikely to be refereeing again the following week or, more than once a season, there's little that we need to do in that sense, because it's not an ongoing issue, if that makes sense.
Of course. But I think what I'm trying to get at here is that little bits like this can lead to escalations down the line where
absolutely
you breed malcontent amongst the clubs. Like, we didn't get promoted in our Sunday League last year, and I asked the league to get promoted so we didn't have to play these teams again that didn't have referees. But they rejected it. So now we're stuck in the same position again. And just to a bit of context, we had a 13-team Sunday League last year, and we were only appointed referees once the whole season. We had a referee that we could rely on for every home game, and I think for our away games, we only had 2 referees that the home teams organised. Apart from that, it was friends or managers. And the manager in question for this misconduct had a set of yellow and red cards and a notebook ready to go, which, from our point of view, was predetermined what was going to happen anyway. So hopefully, I'm talking here about an extreme case, but I think the FA, this is just I get frustrated because I write these really long, detailed, meticulous reports, and I know they're not going to go anywhere, but they're on record somewhere. I think the FA would be keen to look at changing the rules about repeated offences of cheating for clubs, just for the sake of let's say
it's a hard thing to prove, I guess, is the issue.
Yes, that's the thing. But I'm on about these 1% cases where you can definitively prove it. A team with a video camera that has 50 plus instances. Let's set the bar really high. A team like that, like mine, that can look back at this footage and go, "There's one, there's another, there's another, there's another." That wants to be detail orientated, and I'm a great example. I want to get in contact with the county FA as much as possible, but when I hear stuff like that, I feel like, oh well, why should I bother reaching out to the county FA, knowing full well what's going to happen in this instance of the referee potentially refereeing again, and then it just breeds these escalations. So then it makes me think, why do I bother? And that's probably where the mindset is with the going back to the changing gears to the misconduct. This is probably where it's happening. So how are you guys going to get these clubs that might already have that mindset to buck a trend, if you will, to get more clubs interested?
So one of the things we're looking to do is, certainly when it comes to the serious offences, is we're going to be doing a lot more work around promoting the outcome of some of these cases. So at the moment, the FA publish written reasons for any serious case involved where it's adults involved, so they won't do it for young players under the age of 18. But they get put on a document library somewhere in the deepest, darkest recesses of the FA website, and so people don't know what's happening when some of these cases get reported. And quite often, we identified it a couple of years ago, and hopefully we've done some work over the last 2 or 3 years to improve this. But quite often what was happening was that somebody that was the victim of an offence and that reported it to us wasn't aware of what was actually happening at the end. So I can completely understand that then leads to frustration or distrust or lack of confidence in the county FA for taking serious action on this. So again, we've implemented a new system whereby the victims of a serious case will be receiving automatic updates as the case proceeds through our investigation process, to charge, to hearing, to outcome. And across the wider grassroots community, I don't know if you're aware of the FA spokesperson Twitter account.
Yes, I follow it.
So you may see it when
I'll link it below.
Perfect. No, that's great. But, when you get these high-profile cases in the professional game, there is a dedicated FA Twitter account which will announce when charge has been raised. I think you think like Ivan Toney and the betting cases, that was very much kind of used and promoted through that. And we're effectively looking to create a local version of that. It'll be coming out probably in around October time, because we're still just trying to finalise kind of what level we go into. But to actively promote, the outcomes of some of these serious cases, so that people are aware, actually, the consequences if they do it. So there's a bit of a disincentive there, but they will, across the wider community, hopefully understand that we're taking this seriously, that we are making sure that we are holding offenders to account when these offences are committed, and that it brings with it serious impact, serious implication. I mean, we had we had a club, Step 5 club last season that had a ground closure for the first time. I think it was only the second in the country. It's only the first in Berks Bucks. But they had a ground closure because they'd had a number of quite serious incidents involving spectators over the course of 12 months. In effect, and it eventually got to the point where an FA serious case panel said, we will close your ground for one home game. And obviously then hits that club at that level because of the lost income. So we want to make sure that things like that are clubs are aware of the consequences of this.
Of course. And before we go on to the points deductions, in a minute, what I'll do for everybody is share my screen so that we can see like the criteria for points deductions. But the overarching point is at grassroots level, they're introducing all of this misconduct, and it's only going up to step 3, step 4, and then as soon as it goes to professional level, they're not introducing it.
Points deductions only grassroots, so it won't even go into the National League system.
Yes, but like when the initial presser come out, I'll link it below for everybody to read. Basically, what it said was that all of the misconduct and a lot of the charges were only going to be effective from a certain level, basically grassroots level. Do you think that it should have been that this misconduct could have started at the Premier League level? Because obviously, monkey see, monkey do with Premier League bosses like Mikel Arteta and Jurgen Klopp. Sorry to pick on them, but they're the guys that are running up and down the touchline screaming every week. The players as well, whenever they crowd the referee, I know that they're coming down on them hard with yellow cards a little bit more. I saw a Bolton player in midweek get sent off for questioning the referee's decision when he got tripped over and he got yellow carded. So I appreciate that they're doing steps to address that. But why haven't they introduced it at the top? Not for my sake as a 32-year-old adult, but a 6-year-old malleable male or female that are watching TV and think that this behaviour is acceptable. Has this been discussed at all at the County FA? Why hasn't these implementations been starting at a higher level to curb a generation rather than tackle grassroots players that are already in the game?
It's an eternal debate to some extent. You know, do you tackle a problem from the bottom up or from the top down? Certainly, when it comes to the point deductions, this is something that is not an issue, or this level of offence is not an issue in the professional game. The professional game across the professional leagues, you may only be looking at a handful of discriminatory charges each season. When it comes to the serious offences against match officials, up until Mitrovic last season, I think we were looking at years since there had been a case where a Premier League player had physically committed an act of aggression against a referee, let's say. So it's not something that's relevant at the professional game, which is why the FA have introduced it at the grassroots level.
So they think that there's enough already done at the professional level to stop.
Only on those types of
only
offences.
on those terms. Only on those terms. Yeah.
The wider behaviour, I'm interested to see what the impact of the latest clampdown will be around kind of manager behaviour and player dissent. There's been 2 or 3 instances over the last 15, 20 years where the FA have, brought it through and said we're stamping down on this, and it's died out after, it has a big push at the beginning of the season. In the professional game, it gets a lot of airtime, and then that threshold of when it's applied seems to slip, and by the end of the season, they're back to it. So I really hope it is here to stay, because I completely agree that we need to be setting that example at the professional level. You look at the behaviour of some of the Premier League managers and the way they treat officials, and it is appalling. They are in their face, they are screaming and shouting. The referees somehow manage to remain completely calm and passive, 999 times out of 1,000.
Mike Dean was the last holdout. He was the last holdout. He loved the show about himself.
Oh, he did some fantastic facial expressions, didn't he?
Him and Kalina. Kalina, the old Italian referee, was the king of these expressions. The eyeballs would pop out from his head and he would make it known. The Polish referee that refereed the World Cup final also has those stern expressions as well. I don't want to pronounce his name for sake of butchering it, but he was very strong. But I think now we're getting to the point where referees are largely incompassionate and great, because they're seeing it as right down the middle. Yeah, I'm just more worried about the fact that what the level of grassroots players see it as is, oh, well, they're not applying it in the Premier League, so why should we bother? Again, it's just the trickle down effect that people just won't have the attitude if it's not applied at the top.
But by and large, I mean, if we're talking about behavioural issues, so it's the dissent and the abusive language towards referees.
Yes.
And I think you see less of the lower level of dissent in the professional game. You see the dark arts, you see the slyly kicking the ball away, but I think you see a lot more questioning of match officials in grassroots that tips over that threshold. What I don't think the Premier League referees have been strict enough about is abusive language. I think
the crowding of the referees is the big one. The crowding of the referees and the pointing and you can just see what they're saying. That's the big one for me.
You can see they're using expletives, and laws of the game are clear. Abusive language is a red card. It's no ifs or buts. And that's where I hope that there is more of a clampdown, because that's the example we want to set to grassroots referees, and that's what we expect of them. That if a player swears at you at the referee, that's a red card. If they're sarcastically applauding, if they're questioning your decisions, if they're confrontational, it's dissent, and it's a sin bin. Those are the standards we expect, and I fully agree that example should be set at the Premier League and the professional level as well.
Of course. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and what I'm going to bring up is basically a web page that, if you can see it in a second here, is to do with the sanctions and guidelines over rule breaches. So it's called Rule E3.4, I believe it is. And it's all to do with sanctions and guidelines. So you should be able to see it here on the screen. The way that the page is laid out is that I have to constantly move my cursor over it. But so these are the rule breaches. So the first breach of Rule E.34, and Rule E.34 is to do with misconduct charges that eventually lead to points deduction. So for a first breach of Rule 3.E4, 2 aggravated breaches by participants from a club will be 3 to 6 points with immediate effect. So, just to clarify, are aggravated breaches the confirmed cases? So, after they've gone through the committee panel, is that where they've finally been agreed upon that it's a breach?
Yeah, so it'll have to be proven. So the way it works is that you've got FA Rule E31, which sets the general expectations around behaviour. Participants shall at all times act in the best interest of the game and not commit any of the poor behaviour. I could recite it off the top of my head, but I won't do.
By all means, show your knowledge. Show your knowledge.
Oh God, you can test me here. Participants shall at all times act in the best interests of the game and not act in any manner which brings the game into disrepute or commit any one or more of the following: and improper conduct, abusive behaviour, violent conduct, serious foul play. I get the order mixed up. But it's generally behave yourself. We expect you to behave yourself. Okay. E3.2 then, it says that a breach of E3.1 is aggravated if it contains a reference to one of the protected characteristics. So minus pregnancy and maternity status and age, which I don't think is included. So E3.4 then is if there have been two proven charges that have met the criteria for E3.2. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and for the viewers at home, you might just have to pause it. I've got it up here for all of the relevant rule breaches, and pretty much you got it spot on with the rule explanations. So now we're at what an aggravated breach is. I'll just go back to the final page here, which is to do with the actual charges. So the first breach of Rule 3.E4 is 2 aggravated breaches. So let's say I've been a bit mouthy with a referee and I've been sent off twice for dissent against the referee, and it's been proven at a county FA level. That would result in a 3 to 6 points.
No, only if the language you've used is aggravated by reference to a protected characteristic. So it doesn't apply for breaches of E3.1. It's only breaches of E3.2. So,
Okay.
Put it in a bit of context. Most seasons we have around probably 250 charges under E3.1. We've had maybe, I've got my stats on. We had, last season, we then had 30 odd charges that met E3.2. And that's across the whole county. We haven't had a club that's hit 2 breaches of E3.2 for several years. So, the numbers that we're going to be talking about across the county, hopefully we won't have any. For the season 21-22, which is the last season the FA had the full data for when they were bringing this through, there were 136 teams across the entire country that would have met this threshold.
Okay.
So
perfect.
it's only for those highest level of offences. So it's repeat aggravated charges, or the other rule that's on that page, Regulation 96, whatever it is, which is
92
2 or more.
There's 90. There's a few here. 92.2 and then 96.2 or 3 as well. Yeah.
So that relates to those threatening behaviour, physical contact, or assault on match officials.
Oh, okay. So the top part here, Rule E.34, is to do with aggravated breaches. So this would be more discriminatory if, let's say, I was using racial language in a negative way towards a referee or a player or anything. So that's to do with really I understand that. And the second part, 92.2, then, is to do with the more physical or language threatening words. So let's say I've been abusive to the referee the whole game, or there's been a fight, or that's gotten out of control. So this second part here is more relevant towards maybe what you'd see at an adult Sunday League level.
So
potentially,
we have,
based on my experience,
it will be things like so the anything from telling the referee you'll see him in the car park later, to threatening to punch them, to physically making contact on them.
Yeah, of course. So 3 points to 6 points for 2 breaches. So what happens with the first one? So let's say there's one instance. So this is all to do with a cumulative point. So the first one is bottom record, and then if the club doesn't do anything throughout the rest of the season, nothing happens in terms of losing points. But let's say it happens again, and they call the referee up to the car park for a second time in the season. It will then go to the hearing panel at the county FA, and if they adjudicate that definitely happened, and the club can be charged, they'll be docked 3 to 6 points. I'm assuming the variation 3 to 6 is to do with the severity of the case.
Yeah, that's
okay,
correct.
Perfect. So if it's a minor instance twice, you're going to give leniency rather than if it's a really stern example.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So the way it will work, and there's a degree of suck it and see for all of us, because it'll be the first time it happens will be the first time for any of us. You'll have the first case, that'll be done and dusted and closed off. You'd have the second charge. As soon as that second charge is found proven, County FA will then raise a third charge that will be specifically around that breach of E3.4 or Reg 92 or 96, whichever it is, to say you've now met this threshold, you've had your 2 proven cases, we've raised this charge. And the FA say it's a strict liability, so it shouldn't be open for question at that point.
Yes.
If the incident, or it's not even relevant to some extent if the incidents occurred, because we're not going to be looking at those case files. We're saying you've had their statements of fact that those 2 cases were found proven. We now raise the third charge. The club would be able to put in mitigation if they wanted to, and that would then be taken into consideration by the FA panel. They would then make the decision as to the points deduction.
So can clubs put across the mitigating factors before the points deductions take place? So,
Yes.
for example, I'll read the mitigating factors out for everyone at home. So there's 3 points here. Number 1, the club has removed the individual who committed the offence. So let's say a player has hit a player on the opposing team, and that's one of the charges, by removing said player from the football team. The second one, the club has taken meaningful steps to address poor behavioural culture within the club. And the third, the club has accepted full responsibility for the repeat offences. The first 2 bullet points are quite ironclad with the meaning of it. But what does the third point mean? The club has accepted full responsibility. Is that just a case of me saying, oh yeah, I completely understand, I accept it? Or is it being like sympathetic, or what type of qualifying factors are that? Because that's a slight grey area for my thought process at the moment. Or is there like a more clear process on that point?
It will be open to interpretation, but it's about taking ownership of it and taking accountability for it. I think if they're able to, certainly if they've done those first two aspects, that contributes towards it. But if, they're still contesting that an incident occurred, they're still refusing to engage in the process, or if they're coming back and they say, well, the referee had been biased all along, he deserved to be threatened. Hopefully a club would never say that. But you know what I mean? They're kind of still railing about the original cases. That would be then the flip side is that would be taken as an aggravating factor to say that, they're not taking ownership or accountability for their actions. If they've come to it and said, we completely understand that this was unacceptable, we're taking these steps to address it, we've apologised to the referee, we're disappointed in ourselves and humbled by the experience, that would be seen as they're taking ownership and taking accountability for it and would stand them in good stead.
Of course. And we'll just move on to the aggravating factors. So this is more on what you were leading on about when clubs aren't able to show that they've copped up to their responsibility. So there's 4 points: the severity of the offences committed and any sanction imposed in relation to them. Second point, the club has not removed the individuals who's committed the offences. And then the third, the club has failed to make any meaningful steps to address poor behaviour within the club. And the fourth point, the club has a poor disciplinary record in general. So a question, let's say, so this only goes up to a third breach. And I can't imagine that a club will get to a third breach, because that's a lot of offences against them. What happens if this is just a continual thing week on week? Is there a remit for the committee, for the county FA, just to say enough is enough? What happens with a club that goes too far over the line?
First, just to clarify, it would be a third breach of E3.4 or 92.2. So actually that means it's 4 individual offences, because obviously your first breach is at the point you hit the second one. I think, well, there's 2 aspects. One is, I certainly can guarantee the county FA would not sit by and passively let someone get to that level without trying to do some kind of support and intervention. I mean, we have protocols in place for clubs England Football accredited, but even if they're not, if we're seeing repeat instances, we will proactively contact the club management team and say, look, we're concerned about this. We want to help you avoid this happening again in the future. How can we best do that? We had a club going back 6 or 7 years ago that had at that stage a terrible disciplinary record. They were, at least once a month we were getting serious misconduct complaints coming through about them. They were picking up consistent yellow and red cards. As the county FA, we met with the league, we met with the club management committee, we met with the team management committee, and then ultimately met with the players to just try and reinforce the behaviour that we're expecting, to try and reinforce the impact of the poor behaviour. I'm pleased to say that in the 6 or 7 years since, they've probably, across a 50-team club, had only a couple of misconduct cases which have been reported to us. So we will look to do that positive intervention and avoid it getting to that stage. Ultimately, though, if a club does get to that point and is somehow still standing off the back of 12-point deductions and disciplinary fines at every one of those steps as well, a disciplinary panel would have the ability to withdraw their affiliation. It is within the disciplinary panel's remit to do that.
Of course. So the question about points deductions then, have the county FA discussed what they think will happen next season in terms of what they envision the season to look like with points deductions? Do they think it's going to, based on the data and all of the metrics that you guys are obviously working with, do they imagine this to be something that is effervescent towards the end of a season? I only mention this because when this initially came out, I had a lot of people at a casual football session that I run on a Thursday evening, and they were all talking about it, and they said, oh, you're going to get teams try to cheat teams out of other points now. I imagine that isn't going to be the case from like an organiser's point of view, that they're not going to deliberately go out and do this. But let's say it's like a 1% factor in it, because it changes the landscape slightly. Do you think that what's your point of view with the county FA then, and how much they think this is going to impact the season? Is it going to disturb leagues a lot, or do you think that it's not going to get to that point based on the amount of breaches that you get year to year? Or because of the increase with the cases, do you think it's going to go a little bit further for a couple of seasons and there's going to be a teething period?
I certainly hope it will lead more people to report discrimination when it occurs, because they'll understand that the FA and the county are serious about stamping this out and will take appropriate action. I think hitting clubs with sporting sanctions as an organisation, or hitting the team, with a sporting sanction is a good addition to what's currently in place, which is hitting the individual with a suspension and a fine. It will hurt their teammates if they're committing these offences by missing out on a championship or facing relegation. So you may well see more reports coming in. As I mentioned earlier, the 21-22 season across the entire country, there were only 136 teams which would have met this threshold for the first breach. Over the last couple of seasons, I can think of possibly one team in the county that may have met that threshold for 2 incidents with threatening behaviour towards a match official. So ultimately, I think it's unlike, the vast majority of clubs and leagues are going to go through the season without it having any impact on them. It would be exceptional for a club in Berks and Bucks to hit this threshold. I think it's unlikely to have the impact on the vast majority of people. In the same way, actually, the vast majority of games go ahead without these types of incidents happening. It's something like 0.4% of matches that have misconduct or serious misconduct reported. So hopefully, it won't impact your playing experience this season.
Yeah.
But if you are a victim of discrimination, hopefully it will give you that confidence to report it to us.
Of course. So I think the main message from the guidance is that because it's been heavily pushed out, the players have almost like taken it saying, oh God, it's going to happen all the time. But the actual message is to calm down for the players and the clubs, that this isn't going to happen, and it's going to be the repeat offenders that largely don't exist in our county, at least. So it's not going to be an issue, hopefully, if everybody acts accordingly and behaves themselves as exactly. You've made clear. So, yeah, hopefully the clubs can. In terms of the feedback you've gotten, have you received any feedback as a county FA about these rules and charges from member clubs? Has it been beneficial, positive, negative?
No, must admit, not too much. I mean, we're introducing a wider discrimination strategy this year, which is looking at trying to take a more holistic approach to discrimination in football. So we're trying to not just look at the disciplinary side of it. We're looking at the victim support interventions that I mentioned earlier, and trying to create a more inclusive environment through our club and league network. And we've received positive feedback from that through the promotion, through our website, through LinkedIn relationships we've got with Kick It Out and the FA. But I think because the points deduction specifically is an FA initiative, I must admit we haven't had too much feedback that's come back from our members about it.
No, and in regards to the FA and how they're going to be overseeing it, do they have any intervention at the county FA level when it comes to deductions? Because it's a pilot season for it, are they going to have a hand in deciding and helping out with these committee cases when it comes to deductions? Are they going to kind of set the bar, or is it going to be led at a county level?
So all of those cases will go to an FA panel. So the FA National Serious Case Panel hear all charges for aggravated breaches or serious offences against match officials. So they've had specialist training. I sit on that panel as a national secretary, so I'll advise and support disciplinary hearings relating to those types of charges. There's a lot of additional CPD that goes with that, regular conferences with the FA, so that they've all received that appropriate training to make a good or a sound decision on any of those charges.
Okay, apart from that, I think we've covered absolutely everything. What I'll do for everybody at home is I'll put some of the relevant links below so that you can follow home, read some of the sanctions and the guidelines. I feel like it's important that clubs at least are in the loop next season regarding these charges or, how football's evolving. I do largely agree, though, that football needs to kind of change, especially with new members of volunteers in grassroots football as well, as they learn and develop and grow. It's probably better to get them in at day one and have this installed in them at once. I'm a case of 3 or 4 years later down the line, I fully understand it, but there's an initial process where football comes at you quite quickly as a volunteer and as a coach sometimes, and sometimes it gets the better of you. But yeah, so everyone can improve. And yeah, apart from that, I'd just like to say thank you for coming on, Alastair. It's great to hear a county perspective. You're welcome on when the pilot launches later on for the misconduct case that the County FA are launching as well, so that you can describe that as well. Apart from that, I just want to say thank you. And if you have anything else to say at the end, then the floor is yours. If not, just want to say thank you for obviously appearing today.
No, I want to say thank you for the invitation. It's great to see clubs taking such a proactive approach, both in terms of embracing technology in podcasts and video podcasts, but also taking that responsibility to try and educate and upskill your players and make sure they're aware of what's happening around the wider grassroots community. So what I would say is keep it up, and happy to come back on anytime if there's anything you want to discuss. More than happy to.
Absolutely. I'm sure there will be. There's always something in football. I think that's the one thing. It's never at grassroots level and step up to the step pyramid level. There's always something going on. There's always innovations. There's always new technologies. And but no, I'll happily invite you on. But yeah, mainly I do this and I'll be open because I want to be better at learning about football. I got my level 1 coach badge in recently. And it was 4 years down the line. I didn't learn as much as what I thought I would, but some of the resources that you pick up as a coach is invaluable for my experiences and the way that you treat and communicate with other people in football that you just don't have any contact with. Because I feel like sometimes in football, you can kind of be pillared down a bit of a tunnel vision. So if you're in adult male football, that's your tunnel vision. But the FA courses in particular have helped me get a bit of a larger scope on the different types of football and vulnerabilities that people often go through as well. And I kind of want to get people enlightened about grassroots a lot more, because there's a lot of issues that go on, and it's always good to hear from people. I think it's underfunded, largely. I feel like facilities are dilapidating. Coaches need a lot of support, and and one of my next podcasts is actually about it's about 2 hours long, and I walk managers through minute by minute what they should be doing, speaking with new players and running their first coaching session. So I feel like there's a lot that grassroots people can do to encourage more people into the game as well. So yeah, thank you for coming on, because that helps part of the process to enlighten and educate people in grassroots as well. And apart from that, I just want to say thank you for all the people watching at home as well. These podcasts are long. People in grassroots can talk about this for so long. Me and Alistair could probably go on until 9 o'clock this evening talking about a million cases of misconduct just alone, let alone actually talking about anything about football, just about that. So yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on. And yeah, until next time, thank you and goodbye. So, to round out the third edition of our podcast today, I would like to again thank Alastair for his time. I didn't actually know if I was going to be able to speak to anybody from the County FA. They're all paid professionals that work really hard in the local FA. Not only did I think that they wouldn't have the time for me, which I'm glad that they have, I also didn't know what these people can or cannot say in their jobs, in and out of it. So it was very good that I had the opportunity to speak to the first person from the County FA. So be forewarned, everyone at the County FA, and outside of that, I will be in contact. I would love to have your stories told on the podcast about all elements of grassroots football. You for sure can tell your stories better than what I can, and I'd love to have everybody on board. And the same goes for clubs that are in or outside that are watching this that would like to have an involvement. I am all ears. I have an open door policy for any club that wants to come onto the podcast as well. If we're looking a little bit more about what we just went through from the start to the end of the podcast and what we've learned, I think what the major takeaways are is that I was a little bit worried as a club owner coming into it. about the amount and the volumes of all of these county FA charges and misconducts that were going to be placed on the FA, I thought, my God, it's going to be overwhelming for them. So largely, I'm a little bit more at ease now at not only the veracity and the volume of the cases that leads to point deductions are largely few and far between, which should be a relief to a lot of clubs if they keep themselves in line, but it's also nice to know that the county FA actually have a facility in place to be able to administer the safeguarding of all of these cases. So it's really good to hear all of that. Moving tracks and moving on a little bit, we do have a lot coming on the podcast. We will be airing a podcast next week. That will be my interview with James Mason of the RDSL and Give Back. Aside from that, we are on the road to 1,000 followers on our YouTube channel, and if you like our videos and you don't mind putting up with me insufferably for once every couple of weeks, then please give us a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and apart from that, until next time, believe the hype.